We're working on changing the camera angle.
That's right.
That's right.
I don't know. I thought maybe all of you could go over to next to Nancy.
Okay, Jim, she's going to work on changing the camera angle, but in the meantime, I'm going to get us going.
Yeah, as long as I can
So
hear.
I'm calling us to and seeing if there's any public comment this morning. Hearing none, let's do approval of the January 19th, 2024 minutes. Are there any questions or concerns? Otherwise, a motion to approve
Move approval.
and a second. I see Farley's making a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I
Okay.
abstain.
John's Maynard's abstaining because he wasn't in attendance. Financial reports for December and January, and
We don't have January, actually. We do have a draft December, and it's draft because we don't have the official property tax receivable. The 202,000 is what Jim and I came up with for the budget, but that was before all the special session changes, so it's undoubtedly not correct. But we won't get that information from the treasurer until March 10th. So other than that, this should be final. They've booked everything that's booked back into 2023 should be reflected correctly. So we have, what, 809,000 in the bank at the end of December. And you can see the revenues and expenses. And I'd be happy to answer questions.
seeing no questions, move to accept the financial report for December.
So
Moved by Alan Delwich and second by Alan Gregory. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We have the communication plan proposal and also we have the tree planting. So if everyone is in agreement, I'd like to go ahead and, since we're already so late, 15 minutes off the mark, review the tree planting proposal first. Would that be all right with everyone?
Yeah.
Jim, are you ready to introduce this topic to us?
Yeah, I believe so. Basically, you have a proposal that we received from Matt Nelson. Matt, was that you there? I can't see well. Matt, okay, Matt's there. All right, so I'm going to let Matt just kind of explain his proposal. We talked probably 2-3 weeks ago about the city, looking to plant some trees, maybe in the URA. We discussed the fact that we have a budget for street trees that we've been planting along Manitou Avenue very, very occasionally because of the fact that there's just not any places in the right of way. And so Melody is pretty much negotiated in the past with property owners. So anyhow, the opportunities are pretty limited. And so Matt is looking at other locations, and he's come up with more along the creek walk area. And so I'll let him kind of discuss what he's thinking, and you can react to that because they're not necessarily street trees, but they are in the URA.
Nancy has her hand raised. So Matt, before you start, I'll ask her to speak.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly say that Matt was asked by at least one council member to come to the URA to talk and partner with URA in the future on tree planting, knowing that you guys had a tree budget. So he is our city arborist, and you've been on board for what, 2 years now, Matt? Yeah, so he's been doing a phenomenal job for us. So hopefully this will be very interesting for everybody.
Hi, Matt. Thanks so much. Tell us a little bit about your plan.
Oops, there you go. Thank you. Hello, oh my name is Matthew Nelson. I'm the city arborist and horticulturalist from Manitou Springs. Thank you for the kind introductions. So I found out at council a couple 6 weeks ago that you all have a tree planting budget, which is exciting because we need to plant more trees. So I bet you all saw the proposal I put together for you. But in short, the riparian corridor, our Riverside corridor, is in desperate need of replanting. And part of the URA encapsulates the Riverside corridor. So I propose that you all utilize the budget that you have for tree planting to plant 15 odd trees along the creek walk from Becker's Lane by the baseball field to Adams Crossing. So as my proposal, I would plant or recommend the planting of riparian adapted species like cottonwoods, willows, box elders, swamp white oaks, sycamores, London plane trees, species that are going to be conducive to that site. So that is my proposal. I don't know exactly how this process works, but I'm excited to partner with y'all.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Matthew?
I do. I have some comments,
Yes,
questions and
John.
comments. I have two really unrelated comments. The first one is there a plan for the open space that was formerly the Martin's property? Is there a plan on how that's going to be used, developed, not developed, whatever?
Is that 0 Becker's Lane, right up against the road there behind the baseball fields?
Right?
There's no concrete plan at this point in time, to the best of my knowledge. I believe the Open Space Advisory Committee purchased that land.
Mhm.
That is all I know at this point in time, but I believe it's going to be improved somehow.
Well, my comment would be that I'm not necessarily against planting trees. I think that there ought to be a plan first for how the property is going to be used, and maybe any planting then is reflected in the plan. So that would be my preference as to your proposal. And then my other comment, which is unrelated, is that we do have a budget for tree planting, and we have, I think, an opportunity to plant street trees in the newly acquired Dillon property in cooperation with the city. And again, I'm going to ask Nancy, in this case, is there a plan for that property? Because I haven't seen that either.
Are you talking about for the Martin property?
No, I'm talking about the Dillon Motel.
Oh, the Dillon Motel. No, there's not a specific plan yet for the Dillon Motel. That's the whole thing is yet to come, really. At least the council, we haven't seen any plan for how the parking spaces are going to be aligned. The only thing is that the trees, there's interest on council to preserve the trees along the creek bed, as well as I think there were 5 trees, large trees in front of the buildings. And at least one of those has got to come down, but the other 4, they're trying to preserve those trees.
Yeah, well, my comment is this, and that is that when there is a plan developed, there's, in my opinion, there's requirement for street trees in the development of the Dillon property, redevelopment of it, and that would be an appropriate place for us to fund additional trees. So that's number one. And then there's 2 other opportunities potentially in the Manitou Avenue streetscape, the Paragon property. If we ever see a plan for that, we could also potentially fund street trees in that location. And then the Martin property, which I'll talk about at the end of the agenda under old business, there is potentially an opportunity to put street trees in there. So my personal preference would be, number 1, to have a plan for the open space, but number 2, to use our budget on the avenue if we can. So those are my comments.
Other comments or questions for Matthew? Yeah, Jim.
Just a comment. I think I put this in my email out to the board. There is a potential request coming still from the pollinators groups to basically help them fund planting and maintenance of the planters along the avenue. And I asked them if they could please put a budget together and kind of give the board a scope of services. They were unable to do that for this meeting, but they could possibly be ready, I think, for next meeting. And I don't even know if that's something the board wants to even consider again. In the past, we gave them some money to pay for the watering, I think, of the planters. But I just wanted to kind of throw it out there in case you didn't want to commit all the money to this.
Our budget.
I believe it's $5,000, but what I was gonna say is I think we have enough money that we could do the trees along the creek, and at the appropriate time when we have a request for either Paragon or Dillon or the Martin property, we could appropriate additional funds. So I'm not against doing the trees along the creek. And I think we can fund requests as they come up at a reasonable level, including the pollinators. So I just don't think we're that short of money. They're generally small amounts of money.
So Matt, were you asking for the $4,500? Is that your request amount?
This original proposal is just to kind of get the ball rolling and see if you all were interested in this particular project. If you were interested in, say, this Riverside planting, then I would get a price list for you and a final cost. And then we would install the trees. I would, because I plant every tree in town, and we would water and maintain them into perpetuity. So your cost would be the upfront, buy the trees, and then we take care of them.
But are you asking us to buy all the trees or just whatever we're willing to
Whatever you all want to
put
spend.
into your budget?
Yeah.
To me, it kind of resonates like wherever we landed on the bathroom in the park of what's our responsibility and what's the city's. And so that would be my only kind of, that's how I kind of looked at this a little bit too. And we got into that whole discussion about whether we were responsible for city infrastructure. And I don't know if we view trees as infrastructure, but however that would be categorized. That would be my only other concern, and as well, how much of our budget would go toward this request.
Other comments or questions?
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of like this plan. I think, John, I think it is a plan. There are other plans that'll happen on the Dillon property or on the Martin property or Paragon. But I see this as a plan, and I think what I've learned with trees is 10 years from now, the tree will be a lot taller than it is now if you plant it now. If you wait 10 years, it's going to be a little tiny tree 10 years from now. So I think getting new trees in on a regular basis is really essential. And I think Matt pointed out that we have a lot of trees that are at end of life along the creek, and by systematically adding to the inventory, we'll have something 10 years from now when a lot of those big trees fall down or have to be removed. So I'm in favor of this now, and I think it's a good, effective use of our funds, and it's clearly in the URA area that they would go.
You all. So we need to, any other comments or questions? How would you like to proceed?
I guess I'm in a position to maybe make a motion. I'm not against the program, and I think that we ought to give direction to Matt that to come back with a plan. And I would encourage, I guess, the Open Space Advisory Committee to have an overall plan so that whatever you do prior to their plan doesn't conflict with what they want to do later. And that's my biggest concern. It's not that they're gonna plant trees in the riparian area. That's, to me, that's a given, but, just a little vision here on the part of the, whoever's the responsible party for doing the plan. So I would make a motion to approve in concept with the idea that we'll see a more detailed plan at a later date. So we're essentially committing the funds, but at this point in time,
Up to what?
I'd say up to $5,000.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion, Jim, by John Maynard and a second by Ann. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Matt. We'll look forward to seeing you at a future meeting.
Oh, thank you so much. For your next meeting, if you'll have me, I'll have a concrete plan with costs and all that, maintenance. And then moving into the future, I will present any plans for those future properties. The purpose of this plan is I know I can plant here now. And with the upcoming properties with Dylan and all that, I'm proposing plans as they come to fruition, but sometimes what should be a spring 2024 turns into a summer 2025 project. So I'm excited to execute on this. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to make one more comment about this because I think John Maynard brought up a good point. The Dillon Motel site is a great site, one of the few along the avenue to put street trees, new street trees. So if you would be our advocate on that point, we'd really appreciate it because that was the purpose of these funds, was to try to green up the avenue since we'd basically paved it over with the West Side project, Avenue project. So thank you very much. Nice to meet you. Okay, moving on. Carol. Jim, I'm going to let you say a few words first about where we're at with your conversation with Carol. And then Carol, I understand you're going to present your plan to us and we're going to have a conversation about it. Yeah. So Jim, you're up. Just to
Oh.
tee up this issue about the marketing and communication plan.
Yeah, really, this is Carol's item. We've been in communication and Carol's, I gave Carol the feedback that the board had at the last, I think it was a January meeting. And basically said, could you refine the proposal a little bit more? Specifically, the board was pretty adamant about getting something going with the website. Just starting there, but I asked Carol to redo it, and so she has this. You've all seen it, so I'm just going to let Carol go through it and take comments, and then at the end, hopefully, we can come to an agreement and vote to approve the contract.
Okay, that's perfect. So, gosh, I'm loud. So let me just start from the perspective that I feel like from a communication perspective, you guys have a very specific, discrete audience. It's people with money and the wherewithal to create development in the corridor. In some cases, it may be a unicorn because we have to find a willing buyer, willing seller. So from the communications perspective, all the things that I recommended were kind of based on strategic planning, really getting into a strategic sense of, we already know what we want to see, but so far, not very many folks have stepped forward to redevelop. So that's big picture. The second piece, Jim and I did talk about the website. And so I sat down with my web designer. We talked about the links that are broken, the copy that needs to be updated, the things that needed to be fixed. I actually just renewed your hosting for another year a couple of days ago. So website's live. And basically what we would do, we'd go through, we'd fix broken links, we'd track down content, we'd add any additional things that have happened since this website was first launched 8 years ago, I think. Part of the website recommendation was a full day of photography because there's quite a few art installations, the Becker's Lane Bridge, other things that need to be updated content wise. I do not at the moment believe that we need to redo the video that's on that homepage. It's pretty generic and pretty appropriate to the conversation. So really, that's the big picture. I did not write this as a not to exceed, but that's what it is a not to exceed. That was a guesstimate of how many hours it would take. And I think it's just a question of, where we can get access to, content resources. Is it within the city? Is it, things that have happened here? Should I talk to someone on the board to update? And Jim's been great. So, I mean, Jim can certainly be that person too, as far as, updates in the corridor, pending updates, things like that, that would be appropriate to include in the website. So that's kind of the first piece, is the website. And then again, and y'all can tell me if I'm overstepping my bounds, but I've been pretty deep in this project for a number of years. And I think, and Jim and I've had this conversation, so I don't think I'm telling tales out of school. I think the problem is we have a lot of folks that have owned property in that corridor for forever. That property is fully amortized or depreciated over the years. So anyone who would be willing to sell that property has a pretty significant tax hit. And so that's why I recommended some of the strategic things. There's a lot of properties that could be redeveloped, but the ownership doesn't either see interest in redeveloping or doesn't have the financial wherewithal. And so I feel like a lot of the communications would be around, and I think there's a lot of overlap with the work Jim does. So let me be fully, full disclosure on that, is really to sit down with the work session with y'all and really dig into. So we already know Plan Manitou. We know what we want, but the market has not responded to that. That either the community is not big enough to sustain a grocery store. Quite honestly, I think a bread and butter market could thrive here, but I have no idea what the threshold is for bread and butter in terms of revenue. But I really think sitting down and starting with that strategic with you guys, like, okay, get Jim's input about where he's run into roadblocks. And then secondarily, I think potentially a work session with city planning, council, this board, because I know that a lot of development, when Darcy Nicklausson developed Blue Dot in downtown Colorado Springs, Darcy actually effectively rewrote urban code to be able to get that building built. And it was a collaboration between her and city planning. And whether you love or hate what's going on in downtown Colorado Springs, she opened the door for development. Once Blue Dot happened, other people came to the table. And I think what we're seeing here in Manitou is that Farley, you've been great. And then of course, the folks that demolished the LaFun, but it feels like we're kind of at a roadblock. And it may well be that no changes are in the offing. But it just feels like a lot of the roadblocks to development have really hindered the ability. So, now here we are 18 years in, there's only 7 more years to recap an investment. Then you guys know this, well, many of you do from the research we did when we developed the website 8 years ago. We talked to developers, we talked to real estate, we talked to funding, we talked to people across the spectrum. And it's a challenged corridor, but none of that is surprising to you guys. So I feel like a lot of work that would come after that would be to identify, what the resources are, what the challenges are, and then really to sit down with landowners. I had an interesting sort of offline conversation with a commercial real estate friend of mine, because I said, is it possible that someone could retain ownership and a developer could come in and, are there collaborative opportunities that could happen in that space? Because we're looking for a unicorn, and really we're just looking for one, because once that next development comes to fruition, then the open market comes in and says, oh yeah, that's worth investing in that community. So it's a little different. I do not believe that traditional advertising is the direction that we need to head, because I don't think the general public has the expertise, the financial wherewithal, it's not that we couldn't find somebody, but that's not likely where we're going to find them. And I think part of that research is maybe potentially even talking to other markets that are similarly challenged in population size in terms of, can you sustain a grocery store? Are there enough kids for a daycare? What does, affordable housing look like? The things that we've talked about that we want in the corridor, and really try to come up with solutions. So that's kind of a big, long, pitch for what I thought. And you may decide that, and I certainly, Jim and I can talk about what that looks like, and I can, feed him what I learn and he can go after that. But I feel like that's really the next step in communications. And with that, I'll entertain questions because I bet you have a lot of them.
Questions for Carol?
My intention is not to tell you your baby's ugly.
This isn't really a question for Carol. It's a question for the board. I missed the last meeting when this was, when you selected Matt Woodman for this project, and I'm unclear as to what direction you were given, the board gave Carol in terms of a work program. If any, I mean, I look at the work program and the phase 1 basic web update. I say go forward with that, but the rest of it, I'm not sure about.
That's okay.
And I definitely agree. I think until we get further down the line with council, and we haven't even had the first discussion with them about the MOU, I think our impression ought to be there's not going to be money coming our way. So I think this is really ambitious given what we know right now. I think what we had, I thought, agreed to is that a high priority is getting the website fixed, and we ought to sign off on that. And then we ought to wait until we get a better sense of how we're going to interact with council and what their probability is of sending any money our way. Because I don't think at the moment we know that. And if I had to guess, it's not a high probability. So that would be my comment.
And actually, my comment on that would be, if that's the case, I would withdraw the second piece of the proposal.
Other comments? I agree. I think we need to just start with the website. I do wonder though, what about our social media, which isn't really necessary, but it is out there now. So do we just hush it?
So I would tell you, yes, we actually quit doing it the tail end of last year, kind of with some of the confusion. So I haven't invoiced you, or anything like that. And I would tell you, part of what you need with social media or any sort of communications is something to say, and we haven't had a lot to say.
So could we, because people can still go to our Facebook page, so can we have something there that just reroutes, just basically sends them back to the website?
Absolutely.
Other comments? Questions for Carol? Okay, so what I'm hearing from John and Ann at least is we're moving ahead with the website. We're further quieting the social media. We're going to wait until after we've had our next conversation with the council, and then we'll come back and revisit after we've seen maybe website updates and have a better handle on where the city's going, where Plan Manitou's going, where the DDA consulting process is going, some things like that. Once those settle out, we can revisit the communication plan. Yes, Barbara.
And I think we did discuss that you would attend our meetings regularly to pick
Sure.
up on our discussion. I think that was the conversation.
Yes.
So you're better in tune with all the little nuances of things that we're discussing and that Nancy's, entertaining and bringing to us from city council to help further your information cloud there.
I think that's a great idea. I
Okay.
can do that.
Anything else? So with that idea in mind, we're gonna, Jim, I'll let you and Carol work out the, how you want the contract to read. And for me to sign with the idea that Carol's attending regular meetings, we're doing the website updates. The social media is getting cleaned up as a phase one. So we're agreeing to that kind of contract for phase one, the rest to be determined. Am I getting that right? Is that clear to you, Jim? And
I think
Carol?
so, yeah, yeah, so we can write up a contract, including those items. We can always amend it later if you want to progress to some of the things that Carol was discussing earlier, that's fine.
And maybe Carol back to the social media on Facebook or wherever some of those hits are. Maybe there's something static there that's still informational, even though it might redirect to the website, but maybe there's just a basic faceplate of information.
So everything historically will live there already, and I can go in and put in, for further updates, and that'll be super easy. I can even
Okay.
update that every so often, because content, we don't have a huge number of followers on that. It was always very targeted. And as we ran out of content, we kind of lost
Well,
that, but yeah.
And for instance, we just discussed allocating funds for trees, right?
Mhm.
Well, I think we need to publicize that we allocated funds for trees and that it just doesn't go away
Right.
into the great sphere, ether sphere.
Yeah.
And just all those little tidbits. And I think that's what would help Carol when you're here, that you can pick up on some of those actions or discussions that we're having.
Well, but I think I would recommend that after every meeting, that's when you post something new,
I would
because
agree.
there's no reason for you to go in there every week or every couple of days or
Yeah.
anything like that. But after every board meeting, just post some kind of update, and
I
that
would-
should keep it.
Yeah, and I would say that would be inclusive of being in the meeting. So that's not an extra charge. I'm in the meeting, I have information to post. That Amy Mock had been working with me with doing that, and a lot of her role was not inventing, but really kind of like, what can we say now? With
Mhm.
me here, it's super easy for me to post right after. So I'll just do
Or you
that.
can do it during the meeting.
I can do that too. Live stream.
It's a financial overlap.
Any other questions or comments? Carol, thank you.
Thank you. I will recon with Jim.
Okay, moving on. The status of the memorandum of understanding. So Jim and David, since our January meeting, Jim and David worked on an MOU, made the changes that we requested to the MOU, presented it to the city staff, specifically to Denise. Denise and the city attorney came back with comments, and we're now scheduled for the March 12th work session. We are on the agenda according to Denise as of, I think, yesterday, Monday. So we are presenting the MOU to council at this work session for discussion, and then they'll give direction to the city staff about how to proceed. And basically, when the city came back to us with suggestions, it was really just to clean up the language. There was not anything, there were no real material changes to the language that we presented. So that's the version that's going to be presented. The council packet goes out on Friday, so Jim will send that to you on Friday as it goes out. And you're all welcome to attend the meeting. Jim will be on Zoom. Dave, I think David's coming in person. Is that right, Jim?
Yeah,
Yeah, so
I believe he has it on his calendar. I let him know early on, so he should be able to be there.
Yeah. So, and I'll be representing the group as well. But mostly it's going to be David and Jim explaining the MOU and how it would work and answering questions from council. Any questions or comments about that? Okay. Jim, your report.
Oh, okay, hold on. There's somewhere.
Starts at 6.
Okay, so part of it we've been working on, obviously, you just acted on, that was the street tree proposal with Matt. We've been communicating on that. I think that's a good proposal. I think it's gonna work out fine. Talked about revising the MOU. I was surprised that the city didn't have more comments. Very, very minor. Their attorney didn't have much, really, just kind of a clarification of one of the whereas statements about the mission of the plan. And so we just made a reference that the whereas clause included as spelled out in the urban renewal plan. That was pretty minor. And then there was a question about, how do you include it in the city budget? And we just said, it would be in the city will appropriate money as they approve. So it was kind of very simple. And then what else have we worked on? The communication plan with Carol. Had several conversations recently with Rich Block on the LaFawn property. They are looking hard at trying to do maybe an affordable housing project. There was a national developer that contacted me that does that. And so I put the two of them together. And they're kind of going back and forth on trying to see if there's a project there that they could put together that might be a kind of a mix of affordable units and market rate units on that site. But that hasn't come to fruition yet. I know they met with Hannah and talked about the possibility of, what that's going to take as far as density and height. And so it's very preliminary, but that's kind of the direction that project is heading right now. And then the other thing is John mentioned earlier, the Martin property. And there's been several people look at that recently. And there's one that wants to do a high-end car sale, rent, manufacture, well, not manufacture, repair, renovation on sales in that building. Of course, you all know that was a garage at one time, so it might be suited for that use. There's been a restaurant use that's looked at it very, very recently. And again, all this stuff is very preliminary. They're all looking at it and trying to figure out their numbers as far as the renovation costs. The building's not in great shape, so it's going to need some money. I've given some of the proposals information regarding our facade grant, site improvement grant that we just updated. Obviously that's a drop in the bucket, but it's one program. And then of course I've informed them about how tax increment works, and that right now would be pretty subject, I think, to council as far as allocation of sales tax. So all that's out there. There are several people looking at it. Hopefully somebody will come through with a proposal that the Martins accept, and we move on that project. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Jim? Thanks for the update. The crane tour and 2024 sculpture location, John.
Thank you. I met with the Crane Board, which included Farley, by the way, last Friday. And we walked the avenue from end to end, looking at potential sites for the last of the sculptures. And I'm going to summarize the comments that I heard. There's probably 4 or 5 different potential locations. One is at El Colorado. One is at the Martin property, where we would have a pike ride, potential pike ride station, as well as the pedestrian bridge and easement and what have you. That was actually the preferred one. The next one would be the Dillon, in cooperation with the city's planning on the Dillon Motel site. And the last one, of course, is La Fawn. And coordination with any plans that they might have for that site. The general discussion was this, that the preference was probably the Martin site, and probably the Dillon site as a secondary one. The question came up, would the board be interested in continuing the funding for another year or whatever to wait on plans to develop to determine which site would be available and preferable. And so we need to give some indication to Crane about that. My preference would be to get a good site and hold the funding and go forward once either the Martin site matures or the Dillon site matures to the point that we know that there's an opportunity there. So that was, those were the highlights of the sculpture placement. We did have some other discussions, and one of those was the Rocky sculpture. Is that illuminated at this point in time? And I failed to go by in the evening to see. So maybe Jim, do you know? I know we put hard wire to it, but it should be illuminated at night. It is, okay. They suggested that perhaps the Spirit of Manitou also ought to be lighted in the interior. To me, that's the best sculpture that the city has in its inventory, and we ought to somehow promote that more. It's unfortunate that Lulu's left and what have you, but my impression is that lighting would enhance it, and number two, so would some sort of a concrete platform around the edge so people could actually walk around it and see the intricacy of the sculpture. So I mentioned that to Crane, and I don't know that's probably in their bailiwick, but it's just an idea that came up. So it was very productive tour, I thought.
Questions or comments for John? Yeah, Barb.
So John, among those 4 sites, you didn't comment about El Colorado, and from the perspective of that's an existing site that could be worked with as opposed to an undeveloped site, what you're thinking.
Yeah, well, Farley, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that they felt that that was a possible site, but not the ideal site. So that's correct.
Correct.
And what happened to the site that's the signage for Crystal Hills? What happened to that little parcel by the marijuana store? Wasn't there discussion about statuary there at one point or sculpture?
I think we agreed that we would have to work with the neighborhood, with the Crystal Hills. Is the association still? Is there still yeah, but I believe the association owns the sign. The city owns the land, so it sounded complicated. I think, I mean, well, we had talked about that years ago and decided that it would be tricky. But I think that really what came out of this meeting is that we just want to wait because there's so much potential in the next year with all these other sites that it would be nice to be able to choose from all of them, depending on how they all play out. Also, John, did you want to bring up the tree discussion next to the juniper?
Yeah, I say we visited all of the existing sculptures, including Manitou juniper in front of the Holiday Inn. And as you know, there's one of the street trees, when it's in leaf, blocks the view of the sculpture. And the Crane Board decided at the walkthrough that they would certainly support moving the tree, and we looked at potential locations, and pending utilities, it could be moved to the other side of the Holiday Inn, which would, I mean, there's a lot of space there and probably, and it's mostly rock ground cover, and some greenery there would be beneficial to everybody, I think. So I don't know who implements that, and it wasn't clear in our discussion.
Yeah, I was gonna bring it up when he was sitting there, but I thought it was. Yeah, but I think that's who we need to talk to first, it's because we don't even know if we can move the tree. If it's, I mean, it's been there a year now, 2 years.
Yeah, Jim knows the answer to this question because
Oh.
we tracked this down last year.
Yeah, we did. And the final discussions, I think the city was not willing to move the tree. They thought it was part of the approved landscape plan and it needed to stay there. I believe their recommendation is as the tree gets bigger, start to limb up some of the branches so that you can see through it and there. But and the owner, Avik, I had talked to Avik, and he was willing to move it if a site could be found on, that would do the same thing. But I believe Hannah and city planning wanted a street tree location. And now, John, I don't know if the site you just came up with, you just mentioned, if that would still function as a street tree. Maybe that's possible, but that was a reaction I got from the city, was just limb up the branches.
Well, the location that we looked at in the field was a little bit off the street because if it were right on the street, it would block, interfere with the sign, Holiday Inn sign. But my opinion is that it functions almost as a street tree if it's 20 feet back off the curb. So, but I don't know the legality of that from a zoning standpoint.
Maybe we just let Crane
Ask.
ask.
I like that suggestion.
Well, I think Audrey already intends to reach out to him about that, so they can.
What would you like to do about, Alan?
Yeah, I just had a comment about lighting the sculpture. It sort of, I have a little trouble with that. There's so much light in the corridor. To me, it almost seems like bringing a bucket of sand to the beach. If we could somehow subdue some of the light around, maybe get CSU to dial down the intensity, maybe lighting up a sculpture would make sense. But right now, I mean, I can almost see the sculptures from my bedroom. There's so much light coming from the corridor.
And just to be clear, that it was to be internally lit, not externally. So it would be subdued, similar to the Rocky sculpture, is what the thought was.
What say you? We have two issues on the table. The first one is, are we in agreement that deferring the placement and payment of the whole process of beginning a new sculpture, postpone that for a year is what I'm understanding. So we would just hold this budget item for a year until we see how all of these properties settle out. Is that generally agreeable to all of you? I don't think we need a formal motion about that.
So does that mean that there's not a commission that's out there to create a piece at this time?
No, we wouldn't start that
And it's
until we
nothing that
identify.
that's
a
in
location.
inventory that exists already? No, okay.
Right, so we wouldn't even begin the process until we knew the site. So the artist can think about context and all of that.
Yeah, I asked that question and there's no, until there's a site, they won't select an artist and they won't select a art piece.
So we're just deferring it for a year and we'll come back and revisit. Then the second issue is about the Spirit of Manitou sculpture and whether or not we would be willing to partner with Crane to, and I assume I'm putting words in your mouths now, but investigate the possibility of internal lighting and potentially a more formal walkway around the sculpture so that it has better access and is better lit at night. What do you think about that? Can we move ahead with Jim and Crane investigating those things and coming back with a proposal to us? Is that what you're suggesting, John? You and,
I guess unless Farley disagrees, I'd say we leave that up to Crane. And if they ask us for assistance, we can proceed. Will they put that on their agenda, do you think, after that?
I think they'll put it on their agenda, but I think they'll be asking for partnership with us.
yeah, this is one of those, who knows how much it costs? Hopefully not more than any of us are imagining in our heads right now. But if you're willing to send them that message that if they investigate, we're willing to take a look at a proposal. Does that make sense? Okay. One final note from me, what Alan says about lighting on the avenue still remains the case. Truly, it's like driving down the Motor City Avenue when you come down the avenue at night, particularly if you come from any other part of the community and you hit the avenue and you hit all those bright lights, all those CSU lights, it's stark. It truly is. So I'm just going to say that for the record, that I'm in agreement with you that's at some point we need to talk to CSU about putting in different LED bulbs in along the avenue because it's too much. It's just too much.
And I think it also helps deter crime when it's brightly lit.
Really?
Big way around some of these buildings and motels and, you know, living in Crystal Hills. John
Interesting.
does as well. I think it's a benefit and not a hindrance. And I don't find it overwhelming.
Too much? Huh, okay.
Let me offer another comment. I talked to one of the designers of the web project and he thought there were too many lights, that there should have been spaced. I think they're at 50 feet, they should have been at 100 feet. So what if we asked, and I don't even know how this technically works, if you do a trial where you turn off every other light and see what it looks like. And just to see what the impact is, and if it's still bright enough or not, I don't know the answer without having that happen, or even if it's how difficult it would be to do that.
I don't think they'll do that. I mean, they make money to recover the cost of the streetlights by what they charge for the lighting. So I don't think they'll do that. And I agree with Barb. We made a decision to have them that close together. We have them twice as many as they have further east. And that was a conscious decision of the board. So I'm not in favor of doing anything, frankly. And I know it bothers Alan.
Well, you know, I always think that experimentation can be useful, you know, try it for a week, try it for a night, get a different sense. You know, I've lived closer than Crystal Hills to the URA for 41 years, and safety has never been an issue. You know, I used to run, I used to walk. I didn't know there was a crime problem because it's, you know, it'll be there whether it's lit up or not. And I just think if we're worried about securing property, there's different technologies than big street lamps, like, you know, downward lighting, dark skies type things. There's a lot of ways to light up around the perimeter of a building without lighting up the sky. You know, I agree with Debbie. It's bizarre. It's almost like you're driving down a airplane runway with so much light, and it's stark at night. And I don't go out that much driving at night. I walk, but every now and then I'll drive around and it's, oh, there it is. It's just, it's in your face. And it's kind of contrary to the sentiment of many in the community to have more of a dark skies type vibe. Because there's so much beauty that just lighting it up is, it really is a glow. From where I live, I look right down on it.
Yeah, Farley.
Well, as somebody who operates down there, I do, the lights are bright, I agree. However, I am very glad that they are there, and there is a lot of crime in that corridor. And there would be a lot more. There was more when it was badly lit. It's still there now. That is a lodging property area at this point, and people want to be able to walk from the Days Inn to Adams Mountain Cafe without fear. And we have homeless camps on the creek. We have, Adams has been involved in 2 shutdowns with SWAT teams across the street and right next door, actually 2 times at the Park Row and 1 time at Emerald Fields. We have been broken into ourselves through a window. We've had 2 times we've had guns pulled on somebody on the trail. So I do believe that the lighting is necessary. The people that are staying in those hotels, they don't know this area. They don't know what's around the corner when they're trying to walk around. And one of our goals with the WAP project and when the URA was formed was to make it walkable. And I think it's important. I understand it is very, very lit. I get that, but I don't want to go back.
Thank you. I'm so glad we talked about this. This kind of discussion is always good for us and healthy for us to have, right? We learn more about each other and our perspectives and about what's really going on all around us. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Moving on, we have Nancy's report, City Council Liaison.
Grab another one.
Thank you. Several things. First of all, before I forget, and since you're having an executive session after this, so I'm leaving. I talked with Aaliyah and Allison from the HAB, and they are to meet with Debbie and John on either March 14th or March 21st, which are Thursdays after 11 o'clock in the morning. So if you guys could let me know so I can set that up or re-coordinate with them and location, that would be wonderful. Secondly, we had a retreat. The council had a retreat last Saturday, I guess, Saturday before last. One of the things we kind of were asked to do is not put any new projects on staff's plate for the rest of 2024 so that they can really catch up on the plethora of projects that we have put on their plate to date. But one of the things that did end up being on their plate is to look at the process of annexation and the likelihood or the pros and cons of possible annexation of things like part of no man's land, Rainbow Falls, et cetera. So if you guys have anything to input, I know Anne has a lot to say, and I don't want to get into that right now. I think that's what we'll talk about on Friday. But just so that you know that that's coming and has been started. Our city engineer has left. Dole Grabenik has moved on to greener fields. And it's unclear if he will be replaced with city engineer or project manager at this point. It's just a project manager who's been put on board to make up for some of the loss of Dole. We've got a new public information officer since Alex has left. His name is Mitchell. I cannot remember his last name, but he seems to be doing a good job. We are the new planning director has been named. I think you all know that Hannah is leaving us or has left. I think her last day was March 20 or February, but I can't remember. Anyway, his name is Fred Roland Hagan. He's been the Clear County city plan or county planner. He is due to start on the 29th of March. He has 20 years of experience as a planning director. For the rest of this month, Denise will be assuming the role of planning director for the city. You've discussed Plan Manitou a little, but one thing I wanted to make real clear is that there will be several working groups. If you're familiar with Plan Manitou, there are a number of focus areas in it. Some of them that are very important to you guys are planning or economic development, transportation, and there's a couple others that you guys would be interested. Anyway, a couple of your names were proposed initially to be on these working groups. And I would encourage all of you to apply. Council said, don't just, go out and put a general request to the community out to whoever wants to be on these planning groups. And they're only supposed to meet, as we found out afterwards, about 3 times. So it's not a huge commitment. But I would certainly, if you've seen it, it's been on Facebook, it's been on our website, and I think it's been in the paper. So I would highly encourage you to look at what these work groups are going to be doing and encourage you to apply for them. I think they're going to ask for your top 3 interests, so that'll be very important. I think Plan Manitou ultimately will be very important for us. What was
Nancy-
very nice to hear, yeah,
Nancy,
Debbie.
before you go on, are the planning groups, is that different than the focus groups that they've been asking for us to apply for?
I'm sorry, yeah, it's a
Is
focus
that the same
groups.
thing?
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. And ultimately, I guess council has assumed responsibility for appointing the people to these focus groups, which was not what planning staff had or the contractor proposed, but council thought that council should have the responsibility for assigning people to these groups ultimately.
And just to let you know, you have to do that by March 10th. So the deadline's coming up.
Thank you. Anyway, I think all of you would be great on many of these planning groups. So please take a look and apply. One of the interesting things that came out of the update to us is that from the original Plan Manitou from however many, 6 years ago or something, a huge percentage of the goals that were outlined in that have been accomplished. So that report is supposed to go onto our website. Hopefully it will, so that you can see exactly what's been done. But Hannah was astounded when she actually went back and looked to see how much had actually been accomplished. We do have a new city clerk. Elena Krebs was the deputy city clerk, and she has now been appointed as hired as our city clerk. Great time to come to be a city clerk in a huge election year. Barb Winter, congratulations, was appointed by council to be the new PPRT manager representative on the CAC for the PPRTA. So thanks for doing that, Barb. That was a welcome addition. The Dillon Motel is being demolished. It's pretty obvious. And I already mentioned that they're we'll keep 2 buildings. We've agreed to keep 2 of the buildings, one of the administration buildings and one of the housing buildings for future use. The rest will be demolished, and staff is totally taking, there's no community engagement for how at this point, for how that's going to be. It's just build a parking lot, keep trees, and figure out how to do the rest. Let's see, Pike Ride hubs, we agreed to I think 5 new hubs for Pike Ride. They're primarily on the west side of the city, and I can't remember exactly where they all are. But we did agree to those 5 sites that Pike Ride proposed. That's exciting. And the trams, our 2 electric trams will be piloted during spring break, or that's the plan. And I think I'm trying to remember if they go from Hiawatha or maybe further east to the Ruxton roundabout and back and forth, just to see how long they hold their charge, how many people actually will use them where it makes sense. So that's an exciting initiative. So as always, a lot going on, but that's a summary of things that you guys might be interested in. So any questions for me? Yeah, John.
Well, I'm interested in the Dillon site plan, and Did I hear right that there will be no public input to how that's,
There'll be no what?
public input into how that is developed?
None that's, I asked about it at, when it was at a recent meeting, when we were determining if the two buildings would be, because there's three buildings that we might have been kept, we determined to tear down the small one. And there was, at this point, to my knowledge, there's no public input that's going to be solicited.
I find that disturbing. From a community engagement standpoint, to exclude the community from I mean, it's totally opposite of what was done with the library and Hiawatha Gardens and other public projects. And to me, that it's unconscionable to even consider not having public input into how that property is going to be designed. Because to me, there are a lot of opportunities there. And, you know, I've given the council some of those ideas. I've just gotten more from my walk with Crane and the street tree initiative that Matt presented. And to me, they're going about it the wrong way.
Yeah, and I will definitely bring that back, John, because I agree with you. I was surprised, but I didn't push it, so I will bring it back. Thank you. Any other questions? Farley?
I just had a quick question about the trams. I thought I recall that there was discussion about the possibility of the trams going to Safeway. Is that are they going to test that or?
They're not going to test that in the initial pilot, to my knowledge. I mean, again, it's been 2 or 3 weeks since I heard this and things evolve. There was a strong desire on the part of the community when they did have the community engagement for that to have transportation to the Safeway. So that could be a future phase. I'm not sure. I mean, they're starting kind of slow and easy. This would be like an alpha test and then a beta test and so on. So.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm getting lots of questions from the community about
Okay.
it. So I just wanted to be able to say it's not.
It's not, to my knowledge, it's not off the table at this point. It's just not immediately on the table.
Nancy, who drives those? Is that new employees? or
Right now,
existing Employees?
Well, it's, again, they're
Contractors?
testing a bunch of stuff. Right now, it'll be staff, but ultimately, I believe that they will, as it becomes more full-time, they will have to hire people specifically to drive the trams.
But not CDL licensed, not, what is it called?
Oh, great. I know we discussed that, but I can't remember what the answer is. I don't think so, because they're fairly easy to drive, apparently.
Yeah.
They don't require a lot, but I can't answer that right now. I don't remember.
Anything else? Okay, thank you, Nancy. We need to move into executive session. So I'm going to read the executive session item and then I'll ask for a motion to adjourn into executive session. This will be an executive session to determine positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, develop a strategy for negotiations, and instruct negotiators regarding a consultant contract. This is pursuant to CRS 24-6-402 4E Section I. Motion to adjourn into executive session, please. Moved by Barb, second. Second by John. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so now Jim is we have a different Zoom link for this. So Jim is gonna move into the different Zoom link and so are we. So Jim, we'll see you there in a few minutes.